Chapter 18. Piece of Junk. As Sky drove, she instructed Siri to dial Trisha's number. There was no answer, which wasn't surprising, given the unreliable service she wasn't even sure it was going through. Her voice mirrored her regret as she left a message that would cause Tom and Trisha to worry. "This is Sky. So, I'm doing something. Something you didn't want me to do. I'm sorry, I had to. I can't leave Jessie in that situation, but I'll be careful. I'll be fine, and I'll call again after. Now everything's done that can be done." Sky planned to park the car somewhere near enough to Jessie's house she could keep an eye on it. At some point, he would come outside. Then, she could talk to him, and they would just drive away. A good, easy plan. Sky watched the forested countryside fly by. She was in a somewhat flat area of the highway, as flat as West Virginia gets anyway, and she was making up time. Something feels wrong. It nagged at Sky, but as hard as she tried, she couldn't put her finger on it. Her eyes narrowed as she frowned and her mind ran through what she had brought along, her message to Trisha, the events of the last few days. Then her gaze swept the car's signal lights and came to an abrupt stop at the fuel gauge. The red indicator sat on E. Sky's stomach sank like a rock. She hadn't filled the tank after the last trip to Fenton. Working gas stations were hard to find between the blackouts and absent owners. It hadn't seemed safe to stop just anywhere on her way back from the city, and when she had gotten to Colton, their delivery hadn't arrived yet. Now Sky was stuck. There was no place to fuel up between here and Jessie's. Just trees and more trees. She banged her fist on the steering wheel. The only gas station was behind her. Right where the sick were. Turning around wasn't an option. The only thing she could do now was to continue on with the hope she had enough gas to get there. She took a few deep breaths. "I'll figure something out. It will be okay." A short time later, Sky's frustration flared as her Jeep sputtered to a sudden stop. "No. No, 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 no," she wailed as she banged on the leather-covered steering wheel. She laid her head down, but her deep breaths weren't working. "I'm not nearly close enough. There is at least 20 minutes of driving to go." She raised her head as she closed and opened her eyes. "Okay, now what?" In desperation, Sky scanned the surrounding area. A curve up ahead and a curve behind. No houses in between. The last driveway had been a few miles back, and who knew how far up the hill the next house was? If there even was a house. There was one hope. Up the road, she saw an old, red truck. Unsure if it had been abandoned by a disoriented sick owner or because of a breakdown, Sky had nothing to lose, and she studied the beat-up vehicle. She got out of her Jeep and again looked up and down the road, in vain, for a better car. She saw none. Sky sighed and headed toward the truck. "Please, please, please start, you piece of junk." As she got closer to the vehicle, Sky saw the truck looked like it had been used in the recent past. It was a good sign, so she double-checked the area to see if anyone was around to claim it. There was nothing but the road, a million trees, and a field of tall grass to the left that led to more forest. Still, Sky felt odd about taking the vehicle, but she didn't have a choice. Opening the front driver door, she stretched over the clean but worn seat to look for keys in the ignition. She found none, so she checked under the visor and muddy floor mat. Still none. "Well, thanks to my crazy brother, I know how to hot-wire this junk heap." Who would have ever thought that would come in handy? Sky ran back to her Jeep to get the tools she needed. She laid herself half over the seat and half under the steering wheel as she reached under the dash to pull the required wires. After a few attempts, Sky closed her eyes and chuckled when the engine roared to life, then settled into a rumbling hum. "Good boy," she thought, patting the steering wheel. The body might be a mess, but the motor sounds fine. Sky sat up and pulled on the truck door. Her arms strained as the stubborn door refused to respond, then slow and squeaky at first, it finally banged shut and held. She scanned the truck's indicators, happy to find that the needle for the fuel tank pointed almost to full. Sky backed the truck up to her own car and hopped out. After some internal debate, she decided she would take her stuff now. Who knew when she would get back here, and she didn't want to be stuck without supplies. Sky sprinted to the back of her Jeep and scooped up as much as she could carry, throwing it all into the bed of the truck. It was on her second trip back to her car, she heard an angry male voice shout from across the field, "Hey!" She stopped, like a deer in headlights. But she didn't look directly at the man until she heard him roar at her again. "Hey you! Girl!